All right. Well, welcome to another workshop offered by the Office of Work Life. This workshop today is a part of our series where we are focusing on October being National Work and Family Month. And our speaker today is Reba Carroll, and she specializes in working with students on a variety of needs and interests and values and career plans, and the list goes on and on. And so I'm thrilled to have Reba here to talk to us today about how we can use our personalities to thrive at work. So I will hand it off to Reba.
Okay, well, thanks, Izetta, for inviting me. Izetta and I worked together for quite a while here at the Stuckert Career Center. So I know she knows a little bit about what I'm talking about today because we're going to talk about one of the assessments that we offer here and that I use with people all the time is the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And I became enamored with this assessment before I was even working in higher education. I just took it upon myself to go get certified in this thing in 2004, and I wouldn't be working in higher education until 2005. So I think it's interesting. I think it's something that we can take to heart, and it's an ideal way to help you in the workplace if you're understanding your Myers-Briggs type and the Myers-Briggs types of your colleagues as to why we do what we do, and give some grace to each other for why we prefer to do certain things and make the workplace a much more harmonious environment, if you will. So I'm hoping you can see my screen here. We were talking about your interests, values, skills, but we're going to focus on your personality preferences. The gentleman who actually taught me this work in the workshop mentioned that it's not really a personality test. We call it that because we don't quite know what else to call Myers-Briggs. But there are 16 types, as we'll mention here in a minute. And we know that there are more than 16 types of personalities. So I tend to think of it more as your preferences in certain areas and how that can denote your success in the workplace. See if I can get this thing to do what I need it to do. There we go. With students, we talk about majors a lot and careers a lot and occupations, and it's not always the perfect major or career, but the best fit. Sometimes in the workplace, it may not be a perfect environment for you, but you can make it fit and you can make it work to the good of all. So just before we get started, we're not going to be comparing and contrasting and judging. We're looking at just what people prefer. So there's no type better than another. There's nothing that is more desirable than the other or anything of that nature. So we are going to talk about starting out where you get your energy from, which also means where do you prefer to spend your energy. How do you perceive information? How do you take it in and what do you do with it when you've taken it in? How you make decisions, whether it's short-term decisions or long-term decisions. We're going to talk about that. And then how you prefer to function in the outside world. So the world of work, the world of school, even your social world. So what I'd like you all to do while you're sitting, if you'll just cross your arms across your chest the way they're doing in the slide here, and look down and see which arm's on top. That's your comfortable arm. That's your preference arm. So now go ahead and reverse and put the other arm on top and sort of pay attention to how that feels. There's no right or wrong, but you do have a preference. You have when you're writing, if you're right-handed, some people are ambidextrous, but they still have a preferred hand that they write with. If you put the pen in the other hand and try to write, it may feel a little out of place and a little wonky. So that's all this is about, is what you prefer. There's data out there stating maybe we're even born with the preferences that we end up using in the workplace. So it describes who you are, what you prefer rather than what you should do or what's better to do. It describes preferences rather than interests, values, skills, or abilities. In other words, how do you prefer to act within your interests? How do you prefer to show people your values? How do you prefer to use your skills and abilities and so forth? You will work in all of these areas. There are 8 dichotomies we're going to look at here, and you will work in all of them at some point, all 8. But it doesn't mean that you're working in your preference. Sometimes when we're in the workplace, as we know, there are things we have to do that we don't prefer, but it's necessary for the job. So we're going to be talking about 4 different areas. So the first dichotomy we're looking at is extrovert, introvert. The second is sensing and intuitive, thinking and feeling, judging and perceiving. So some of you have probably taken the Myers-Briggs, or you may take it after this. We'll be looking at the letters of each one of these dichotomies. So E for extrovert, I for introvert, S for sensing, N for intuitive, because we've already used I for introvert up here. So this is what the basis of what we're going to be working with. So orientation of energy is the first thing. So when you take a Myers-Briggs, for those of you who've taken it, you know you get a 4-letter code. Your first letter will be either an E or an I, and that has to do with the energy source. Where do you spend your energy? How do you get it? One of the things I like to think about in terms of giving a visual is to think of yourself as you have a battery in the core of your body, and that's your energy battery. How does it keep charged in order for you to function in the world? So we're going to talk about extrovert. The energy is more external. They need to reach out, meaning extra, and pull in energy through conversation, through activities, through events, even if it's just through the television. And when they spend their energy, it's an outside projection. It's more of a thrust out. So they spend it outward, they bring it in from outward. Typically, with extroverts, their main mode of communication is verbal. It's through conversation. So they may blurt things out just because they tend to think out loud, and it'll come out. And then we all know people who start talking about what they believe in, and the longer they talk, eventually they may talk themselves out of it. So, well, come to think of it, maybe I feel this way. That is a very typical extroverted type of behavior. Nothing wrong with it. It's just the preference of thinking out loud and wanting to have someone to bounce these thoughts off of. They like to talk about broad topics. They're involved with people and things, interaction, action. They will behave or do, think about what they've done, and then behave again. They may tweak their behavior the next time, but it's a very almost forceful energy. Now, there are degrees of all of these that when you take the Myers-Briggs, you may have a low or slight preference for extroversion, even if it's the numbers when they measure go from 0 to 30, for example. So if you are a 2 or a 3 on extroversion, you're still an extrovert, but to the degree that you display that preference may vary. I had a class I was teaching once, and I tested the students, and I had a gentleman on the front row who tested 100% extrovert. I could not get him to stop talking so that I could give my presentations, right? So that is someone who was using the extroverted energy to an intense degree. So on the other side of the coin, we have introversion. So with introversion, that battery can easily be run down if this individual is around an extroverted job, extroverted people. It's as if the energy is being pulled out of their battery. So in order for their battery to remain charged, they have an inside pull. They tend to hang on to that energy to keep it in. They're more like to build it through thoughts and ideas, maybe journaling or just pondering a question, reflection. They like to think about what they're going to do, then take the action, and then think about the outcome. So typically, not always, but typically you will see an introvert, they are less talkative. They may prefer writing or in texting rather than talking, emailing rather than talking. So their idea about communication may be more in depth, for example, meaning with extroverts, they tend to have a lot of friends, for example. Introverts may not have as many close friends, but they've got friends they've had from grade school, junior high, high school. They tend to hang on to the quality of that friendship. And when they're with people they trust, like family and friends, they can behave in a very extroverted way that you would never know that they were actually testing out as an introvert. And we're going to talk about at the end of the day how to tell the difference really between an extrovert and introvert based on their energy. So, extroversion and introversion are complementary attitudes toward the world. This is the energizing dimension. Extroverts' essential stimulation and energy comes from the environment, the outer world of people and things, and introverts' essential stimulation and energy come from within, the inner world of thoughts and reflections. Extroverted tendencies, energized by other people, energized by inner resources and inner experiences for the introvert. So we're talking, we're action, we're social with extrovert, many friends, easy to know. Easy to know because they're talking and they're sharing. Introvert, quieter, reflective, intense, perhaps, harder to know. In-depth relationships. So what we're talking about here at the end of the day, I mean, I've worked with some introverts who are very extroverted in their behavior. The way you can tell the difference is when you ask someone, when you go home at the end of a busy day, what do you do? Let's say you go home to a significant other or a friend or a family member. If you're an introvert, you have probably been pulled dry from energy. They've just sucked all the energy out of your battery. The tendency for an introvert is to go home, take a breath, go to a room and shut the door, okay? Because they need to recharge that battery. They do that through quiet often, or reading, or maybe they're watching TV, but it's something just to help them decompress so that the battery can continue to recharge. Extrovert, on the other hand, may still be tired from a long day, but they have to share out and tell every detail to their partner exactly what they did. Oh my God, remember when I told you I was going to do this with so-and-so and such and such? Well, here's what happened, and then this happened, and this happened. Now, what happens if you have in the workplace or at home extremes on extrovert and introvert? If they don't understand one another, the extrovert may think, well, this introvert is so shy and cool and aloof, and they're not sharing with me, they're not listening to me, and that may not be the case at all. They may be taking in and listening very closely to what the person is saying, okay? So in a relationship, the extrovert can be saying to the significant other, why don't you want to talk to me at the end of the day? Did I do something? Did I hurt your feelings? Are you mad at me? Unless they understand that that person's battery is depleted and they need to go away for an hour or two and recharge. It doesn't mean the introvert doesn't want to share what's happened with their day. Is that they just can't. So the extrovert says to the introvert, how was your day? And the introvert says, that's fine. I'll talk to you later. Okay. So in the workplace, the same thing. Someone who never opens their mouth during a staff meeting, you think, well, they're disengaged, until you get them maybe one-on-one and ask them what they think, maybe in their space, in their office, and you get all kinds of information that will come out and ideas that can be very helpful. If you're an extrovert, we do have to be careful to not disallow an introvert's behavior. And an introvert needs to make time to make sure that they can let the extrovert know what they're thinking. So as you can see, it can be a delicate process. I think introversion and extroversion are two of the most misunderstood parts of the dichotomies in the Myers-Briggs and can cause a lot of issues in the workplace. Okay, so we're going to go to the next dichotomy. It's how you take in information. So we're talking about sensing and we're talking about intuition. So with sensing, these folks take in they take in information in a really concrete sort of way through the five senses, what they see, what they the smells, the sounds, what's obviously a hard copy of what's in front of them is their reality. So they're very practical. They are excellent at staying in the present moment. They want to know the facts of a situation. They love acquiring strong skills that are established. So maybe they're the best person in the office for this skill or that skill, and they enjoy being the go-to person. They enjoy being the helper and helping other people establish those skills as well. So it's about utility and step by step. So often in the workplace, these are the people that are the doers. They want action, but they want it within structure. They want to know what is expected and when it's expected and who it's expected by. So if you're an S on the Myers-Briggs, you're a very organized, detailed person. On the other side here, we have intuition. So intuition is more of not a focused look at the world, but a big picture. What are the possibilities? Let's step back and look at all of this. So they tend to go more with their sixth sense, with hunches rather than necessarily the facts. What could be? They may talk about theories and future possibilities. So nothing is really locked in necessarily. It's the opposite. It's opened up. They can be very insightful. They enjoy learning new skills, but they may not be the best at it. Sometimes with intuition people, they're sort of a jack of all trades. When they learn something, they think they know it. They can get a little bored with it and go on to the next new thing, to the next new novelty. And they can sort of leap around a little bit in terms of how to get something accomplished. So, for example, if you give someone the instructions for how to put together this lawnmower that you bought, a sensing person is going to lay out the directions, make sure they have all the bolts, make sure the directions are clear, make sure they have all of the parts, a quiet space to function, and start step by step putting this lawnmower together until it's complete. If they have questions, they want to make sure they've got a number that they can call to reach out for information. They want to make sure that it works well. One of the biggest fears of anyone that's sensing is the fear of dropping the ball and disappointing someone and not doing their job. So they're very focused on being efficient with this. An intuitor may do the same thing, check for nuts and bolts and look at the picture of what it's supposed to be and have a quiet space. But they may just decide to tweak it a little bit and skip over step 3, leap around a little bit to go over and try, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? So they may have to start over when they find out that their way of doing it doesn't work, or they may invent a new type of lawnmower, who knows? But these two can work together very well in the workplace. An example I like to give for these two is, say, an apple pie. I say to them, we're going to have an apple pie factory. The sensors are going to be the ones to do the actual baking of the apple pie. They are going to be the ones who are going to want the recipe, make sure there's a right amount of sugar, flour, salt, cinnamon, apples, temperature of the oven, how much is going to be the output, the detailed people that are making the actual concrete product, and they want to become very established with their skills in doing that. Intuition, this is what you're going to do. Yeah, maybe if you can get your hands in there and enjoy baking the pies too, but I want you out marketing. I want you researching. What's the big picture for apple pies in the United States? Is that, a mom's apple pie still the thing that we relate to, or is it now cherry tarts? What does the public think? What is the future of apple pies? What are the possibilities? Do we want to add another ingredient, and so far and so forth? So they will come back to the factory with new information, cutting information about the possibilities of growing this. Now, if they hand a new cherry tart recipe to the sensor people, they may get a little irritated and say, "Wait a minute, we haven't perfected this yet." Give them time. Believe me, people that are S will figure it out, and will be, next thing you know, they're the number one cherry tart making people, right? So can they work together? Absolutely. But they have to understand in communication, when they tell a sensor, "I need you to bake a cherry tart," you need to say, "I need explicit details: who, when, why, where, and how." If they understand that, they can show patience and grace and gratitude for this person who's willing to take care of the detail that an intuitor or an N may not want to do. So the sensing tendencies is to see specific parts and pieces of how things go together, step by step. What do we do now? Where intuiting sees more patterns in relationships. They look at the past. N loves to look at the past and at the future as to, well, this happened in the past. What can we do in the future to prevent it? Where S is saying, let's just take care of now. What do we have now? What are the things that matter in this moment? So sensing tendencies focus on the present and what is there now. The N, or the intuiting tendency, focuses on the future and past, anticipating what might be based on what was. Sensing starts at the beginning, takes a step at a time, and wants to know what the steps are. N's jump in anywhere. They may leap over steps, sort of assuming the steps are obvious or can be invented. And that's a problem. I am an N myself, is to stop and slow down and explain my abstract logic. So tendencies, S works hands-on with all the parts to see the overall design. That's one of, in terms of occupations, S is like the hands-on work, whether it's working outside or working in an office. They like the tactile part of the job. And study the overall design to see how all the parts might fit together. What are the possibilities? So sensing is about facts and down to earth, practical, hands-on, specific, in order, very detailed. Intuitive, the past, they can be creative, focusing on the future. What are some concepts? What is the big picture? There's imagination there, and inspiration, and ingenuity. So more tendencies for S's, more materialistic, and they may seem literal-minded to N's, whereas N's may seem like fickle, impractical dreamers to S's. Not if you understand the preferences here and make allowances for those preferences. So the third letter that you'll find will either be a T or an F for thinking or feeling. That's how you make decisions, especially long-term decisions about your career or your relationships, but it could also be something short-term in decisions. So with the T, they make decisions more through the head. Logical system, more objective, more based on justice and fairness, principles, reason, critique. In other words, what's worked in the past can work now. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So a lot of times with thinking people, they'll make decisions. You'll see a lot of CEOs with T's, people in the military, people in medical sciences or in any of the sciences, where 2 + 2 always equals 4, and that's the basis in the foundation that they make their decisions upon. With feelers, decisions are made more with the heart. The value system plays a big part in the decision that feelers might make, because they make decisions based on what they value and how what they do or say might affect another person or group of people. So they tend to be more careful in that area, because harmony is a big issue and desire for a feeler. So it's subjective when you make a decision. Well, it depends on the situation. It depends on the individual. It depends on what the danger is, or anything of that nature. So they don't tend to put a blanket type of decision making over everyone. They're complementary. Again, they do like harmony. They tend to be more empathetic and compassionate regarding how the decision should play out. Does this mean thinking people don't have empathy and compassion? Absolutely not. It's just, where do you go when you're initially making a decision? Typically, what is your typical preference? You may go to T first and then decide, because you're very logical and reasonable, to go more toward the heart. And it doesn't mean that feelers are wishy-washy and totally avoid logic and reason. So, but you do have a preference with thinking, whether you step back and observe to help someone solve a problem, versus feeling, where you're leaning in. So here's an example I like to give on this. If someone comes to you and they say, oh, I've got to be on the other side of town in 10 minutes because I have the interview for my dream job and I've locked my keys in my car and I don't know what to do. So a thinker, a T, might step back, look at the situation and say, okay, so let's go ahead and take a deep breath and let's look at what you can do. Can you call the employer and reschedule and explain the situation? Can you call and have your car remotely opened, or have AAA, or another mode? Do you have time to take a bus or call an Uber? They're still helping through a very logical, almost detached sort of approach, but they're still helping. They're still being helpers. The same person comes up to a feeler with the same situation. The feeler sees the distress immediately and goes straight to empathy. If they're very strong and clear on that preference. They may not ask the questions about, have you done this, this, and this, and this, and the logic. They're saying, hop in the car, I'm going to take you. Because they're feeling that they don't like the disharmony or the feeling they're picking up on. They're going to step in and actually physically get this person where they need to be. Doesn't mean that a feeler might not say, what about an Uber or this or that, or because they can't take you for whatever reason. But they will, the value of the person and what the person's going through is actually more important to them than the outcome of this interview. So sometimes we bounce back and forth between our thinking and our feeling. As I mentioned when we first started here, we will behave in all of these areas, whether it's thinking, sensing, intuitive, energy, introversion, or whatever, but we will have a preference in most situations. So let's talk about thinking. Their tendencies is logic, and feelings tendencies goes by their own personal convictions, and that's of course going to differ with everyone. So thinking, we're talking about logical, objective. They want clarity, especially if it's ST. Definitely want the clarity there. That's a core, an ST. They may seem detached, firm. They're into justice. You see a lot of judges that are T's. Policy, laws, a lot of people in the law profession. Feeling is more about making a decision to provide and to keep harmony. They are subjective rather than objective. They tend to be more humane on a global scale, especially NF. Social values, involved, fair-hearted, persuasive. So the thinking tendencies are concern for truth and justice and rationality. Feeling tendencies are concerned more for the relationship and how others are affected by an outcome in the future. Thinking tendencies, assess situations by stepping back from them and seeing things as an onlooker. Objective. Feeling tendencies assesses situations by putting self in that situation, seeing things as a participant, empathetic. One is not better than the other. These are both really valuable, especially in the workplace. So let's say you're working on a project, maybe building something, for example. In a group, the T's may look at some blueprints, for example, and say, this isn't going to work, and this isn't going to work because of this over here. They're seeing what's wrong with the picture because they're trying to be stubborn or critical. No, because they are working through the project to make sure that it goes well. They want the project to succeed. So they're looking for what won't work immediately in a critical fashion. Where a feeling tendency, they may look at something and say, wow, we did a really great job here. It's easy to read. Everything seems clear. Thank you, so-and-so, for doing your part. Thank you, so-and-so over here, for doing your part. And they might eventually discover, oh, but this part over here is not going to work. They may do the same thing. They can go to logic. But they're more concerned with the feelings of the people who they know put a lot of hours into this thing. Where the T is saying, we've got to get this out to the public. It may be well and good that we've spent a lot of hours on this thing, but if we turn it in the way it is, we'll have to start over. So you can see how they can work together, but you can also see how, depending upon the degree of thinking that you may have or the degree of feeling, it can cause some tension. That's where, if you understand someone is a very strong T and you're a feeler, you can appreciate what they're doing. And the same thing with the thinker, appreciating a feeler for keeping the group and the relationships cohesive enough so that the job can get done. So, T's or thinkers may seem cold and condescending to feelers. Feelers may seem fuzzy-minded and emotional to T's. But not if you understand what the preference is about. Last one is how you operate in the outside world. So we're talking about work, we're talking about school, again, in your social life, in your religious life, in your political life, in your leisure life. How do you behave in the outside world? So that's either a J or for judging, and P for perceiving. And so we'll start with J, and judging is not judgmental. What they're talking about here is if you are a J or a strong J especially, you're able to sort of look at a situation, determine or make a judgment about what needs to be done there, or look at an individual and see what a need might be very, very quickly. And what J's want to do is to address the issue very quickly as well. J's like closure. They want to see a situation, sum it up, fix it, put it away, and go to the next thing. So if they're a student, for example, and they have a lot of projects going on, they're pretty good at looking at saying, okay, I need to manage my time. I need to make a list. I need to see the priority for what needs the least amount of time and what is due first, what needs the most amount of time, study time, and so on. Do that thing, put it away. So the world of academia is a world of that kind of demands we be judgers in that sense in order to be organized and to get things accomplished. So judgers like to plan, they like to regulate and control. They don't like ambiguity in terms of the future. They want to make sure that that's under control, that something won't go wrong. So they make lists. They like issues to be settled so people can move forward. Again, back to closure. They like to run their life, set goals, and they want to be decisive. They're the ones who will be in a meeting and say, we've talked and talked, can someone please make a decision so we can move forward? Those are the J's in that meeting. They're very organized as well. So on the other side, we have the perceivers, which is P for perceiving. And Judges are very locked into time. They're always watching the clock and being, where they need to be at the right time. Perceivers are not necessarily driven in that way. They tend to be more spontaneous in terms of what happens. They're adaptable and able to go with the flow and say, okay, so this is what we're doing now. That's interesting. Let's try that. They may be a little tentative when it comes to closure. They don't like it. If you give an assignment to judges and perceivers, for example, and you say, you have a paper due in a week, write about whatever you want, and I'll see you later. And the judges are saying, well, wait a minute. The SJs are saying, wait a minute. What do you mean write about anything? What is the paper for? How do you want it written? How do you want it delivered? How long should it be? When is it due again? Are you talking midnight that day or at noon that day? So because they need that sense of step-by-step control that SJs have, and that's a color, that's a gold color. We won't get into that, but the perceiver, on the other hand, is like, I can't make a decision about what to write. Jay's already got the topic down and has it outlined. The perceiver says there's so much out there, so they might be tentative to make a decision about to write until they get all the information in, and then they'll decide. They gather the information. They don't want closure. They want to leave it open, because if I choose this topic now, what if I'm halfway through the paper and I discover this thing over here and think, oh, that would be better, and then it's too late. So they like to leave it open and stand back, especially if they're an in. So they're flexible. And when the good news about that is when trouble comes, they're able to pivot a little easier. They're able to go with the flow a little bit more. They tend to be adventuresome. They tend to be in groups. They're creative. They like fun. And in terms of this structure makes them a little nervous, because to them structure means being closed in, and again, they don't like the closure. Perceivers are the ones who show up for class and say, was that due today, or what paper? Because time is not as of the essence as it is to the J. J's would do well to hang out with perceivers for a while to learn to have a little more fun. Perceivers need to go find those judges for getting some tutoring and help with their calendar and their planner. So can they work together? Absolutely. In school, in the workplace, if you know what that person's tendency is, maybe if you work with someone who's doesn't want to start on a project till they have all the information, then help them get the information so they can get started. And if you're a perceiver and you think, I don't know quite how to begin or get started because I don't know the structure, go find the J's in the office and they'll help you. J's love to be helpers. So don't deny them that opportunity. If you're a perceiver, go ask for help because they know. So it can be the greatest source of interpersonal conflict in an office, especially because of deadlines. So the J tendencies, they enjoy being decisive. The perceivers enjoy being curious, exploring, discovering. They like surprises. J's don't, not so much, not the surprises. Judging, daily planner, planned, orderly, organized. Control is foremost in their mind. They're fixed in their opinions often. They like closure. They like to be definite. They like structure. Perceivers wait and see, tentative, adaptive, spontaneous. Go with the flow. Again, flexible, pending, don't close it, and what deadline. So J's, again, they feel comfortable establishing closure, and perceiving feels comfortable maintaining openness. There's not one better than the other. It's just perceptions. J prefers organization. Perceiving prefers a flexible lifestyle. Judging likes definite order and structure, and if there's not much going on, they will create it. A perceiver likes going with the flow and the current energy, whatever that energy might be. Jays like to have life under control, and perceivers prefer to experience life as it happens. Jay handles the deadlines, and perceivers use deadlines to energize to complete the work at the last minute. So here's the thing. A perceiver may finally decide on a topic for a paper, and they write it the night before it's due. And it's just as it's well written, but they are what we call pressure prompted to get things done. A Jay might be having a nervous breakdown waiting to the night before. They're not going to do that because they know that's a lack of control. There's too much unpredictability there. So both people turn in papers and they both get A's on the paper. So the approach to how they do things, there's not one better than the other. Although, as I said earlier, in a college environment, we tend to hold in higher esteem those that are the judges and the perceivers. A lot of students come in, they test as perceivers as freshmen. I test them again as seniors, and they switched over to judgment because of that. We've been programmed to do that. Probably once they're on their own and back in their work life and settled in, the true perceiver of them will come back to the forefront again. And they know how to be a judger. It's just not their preference. So J's may seem demanding, rigid, and uptight to P's, and P's may seem disorganized, messy, and irresponsible to J's, unless you understand where they're coming from and about preference. So that's a thumbnail sketch of Myers-Briggs. There's a lot out there that you can do, a lot that you can study. If you haven't taken it, I recommend that you do. There are a lot of them out there. The ones that we offer here at Stuckert are what we call the formal version of the assessment. You're not going to find it online. It has to be interpreted by certified interpreters. But there's a site called 16 Personalities that's really interesting, and they pretty much hit on target. They may not be quite as valid and reliable data, but go ahead and take that. There's also one, humanmetrics.com is one I recommend as well for taking the Myers-Briggs. Questions?